Okay, so we're looking at the Gilded Age and the Industrial Age and how and the different robber barons that took advantage of this situation.
A handful of men will rule business and the nation for half a century with their brilliance and blind ambition. They know no bounds, recognize no authority but their own.
The people who were called the robber barons by their critics, and I suppose would be called industrial titans by their admirers, were really the agents of the first stage of modern industrial capitalism. An enormous number of the big corporations that are still a major part of American life were created in the late 19th century, most of them by very talented, very aggressive, often very ruthless individual entrepreneurs. And their achievements are extraordinary. They transform.
An entrepreneur is someone who makes their own business. That was a word that was a question in one of that releases I gave you.
The American economy. But they also did so very often in a very brutal, harsh way, which is what led them to be called the robber barons.
You might have seen the word trust written on that guy's shirt there. I should have paused it earlier. But there's kind of three different phases of business. You have a business like a small business, like a taqueria or something like that. You have a trust where different businesses will get together so they can control, they can agree on prices and things like that. So they can have higher prices, which hurts the consumers, which is good for them. And the third level is a monopoly, which is bad. Okay? And so these businesses are taking advantage of the people because it's a laissez-faire economy. Laissez-faire is French for let it be. Remember? Okay.
The most powerful of these men is J.P. Morgan, the man who finances the railroads and the rest of American industry. He has a vision of a bold new industrial nation towering over the world, and he makes it happen. His origins are hardly humble. His father is a rich international banker who worries over his son's often impulsive judgments. Young Morgan gets a big boost from the Civil War. He sees the conflict as a business opportunity, not a cause, and profits greatly. He'll soon control 4 of the 6 major railroads in the country, banks, insurance companies, industrial corporations, a financial empire worth billions. At a lavish dinner party in 1900, a close associate of Andrew Carnegie convinces Morgan to buy out Carnegie's vast steel holdings. A few weeks later, Carnegie scrawls the asking price of $480 million on a piece of scrap paper. And U.S. Steel, the world's largest industrial enterprise, is created. Andrew Carnegie, unlike Morgan, had not been born with the proverbial silver spoon in his mouth. Carnegie is a genuinely self-made man. From his immigrant father, an impoverished Scottish weaver, young Carnegie learns both the value of a dollar and the importance of social justice. Working as a railroad official, Carnegie grasps a simple idea better than anyone else. You can't build railroads without rails, so he invests in iron, eventually controlling the industry. And when iron gives way to steel, he dominates that industry too.
There was tremendous resentment of the way the wealthy used their wealth. That was one reason why people like Andrew Carnegie and to some degree John D. Rockefeller were such conspicuous philanthropists, because they were concerned that
first off, a philanthropist is someone who gives significant amounts of money to charities. Okay, it's not like you give $1 to a homeless guy. You're about thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. Conspicuous means like they were looked at ugly or looked at them weird. Okay, if someone's conspicuous, you're gonna get pulled over. You understand what I'm saying? And so they looked at him weird when he would donate this money because look how much money he would spend on his own self. And you care about rich, poor people too, and so he was looked at weird.
Wealthy class was going to become a target of national anger if they didn't legitimize themselves in some way in the eyes of the nation. That worked for Carnegie. He became, after having been one of the most brutal steel barons of the late 19th century, he became, in the last years of his life, a sort of fuzzy, beloved philanthropist.
In his Gospel of Wealth, Carnegie proclaims,
Gospel of Wealth is a book that Andrew Carnegie wrote. Gospel of Wealth is a book that Andrew Carnegie wrote.
This, then, is held to be the duty of the man of wealth: to set an example of modest, unostentatious living, shunning display and extravagance; to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds; to produce the most beneficial results for the community, the man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren.
So, if you're a man of wealth in his book, he says you shouldn't live super hardcore rich. That's messed up. You should give any extra money you have to the poor, so that, and invest in their business and stuff like that, and so that you're not looked as like a rich man, but a pillar of the community.
Still, many prominent citizens wonder if the growing gap between rich and poor will do lasting harm to American democracy. America is now a very different country from the nation of small farmers and merchants imagined by Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. Little more than 100 years after the Revolution, the robber barons have transformed it into a corporate giant and made the U.S. the world power in oil, steel, finance, and communications.